Happy New Year. I hope you all had a nice Christmas and a great start to 2022. Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome and we're back after the end of year break for UFC Vegas 46, which is headlined by Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze in a phenomenal featherweight bout. First of all, though, I want to apologise for there being no video breakdown this week. Unfortunately, I am still testing positive for COVID, so I'm unable to get into the office where all of our video equipment is. I'll be back next week, though, for that huge heavyweight championship fight. Do not worry about that. And we dive right into that phenomenal featherweight headlining fight between Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. And stylistically, this is a very interesting fight. Two strikers, outright strikers, but different style of strikers. So with Calvin Kattar, you've got a solid boxer, good speed, good combinations to the body, to the head, loves being inside the boxing range. And then on the other side of the cage, you've got Giga Chikadze, who's got that phenomenal kickboxing background, an absolute phenom when it comes to kicks, spin attacks, kicking to the legs, to the body, to the head, and he's also good in both stances as well. So it's a real clash of styles from a striking perspective. I do think, though, from that striking perspective, that Giga Chikadze is advancing and developing as an all-round striker more than Calvin Kattar. So what I mean by that is I think the hands of Giga Chikadze, the boxing is definitely picking up, and I think the boxing in the hands of Giga Chikadze is better than the kicking game of Calvin Kattar. So Giga Chikadze is rounding out that striking game for sure. I don't think we're going to see too much of the wrestling or grappling in this fight, although I do think if anybody is starting to look for takedowns, it is going to be Calvin Kattar. But for me, the real interesting factor of this fight is how long does the fight actually go on for? I think if the fight ends early, then it's going to be Giga Chikadze, who I think is going to start faster, is better at more ranges. But if the fight goes late, if we start seeing late round 3, round 4, round 5, and if it does go to a decision, then I think Calvin Kattar's going to have advantages there, because I do think Kattar's cardio, his conditioning is going to be better than Giga Chikadze. So it's all about, for me, when this fight ends. And what I am actually going for here is I do think the fight is going to end within the first 3 rounds. So I do think Giga Chikadze is the more likely fighter to win if the fight ends within the time limit that I'm thinking it's going to. Giga Chikadze is developing rapidly, is improving at a rapid rate. Like I said, his hands are getting better. And one real concern that I've got of Calvin Kattar is the beating that he took against Max Holloway last time out. Now, Kattar's took the correct amount of time off, but honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if the beating Max Holloway put on Calvin Kattar has changed him, has altered that durability. And if that is correct, again, it's only an assumption, but if it is correct, then Giga Chikadze definitely has got more chance of finishing Kattar than the other way around. Like I said, if the fight goes late, if we do start seeing late round 3, round 4, round 5, then I think Kattar's going to take over at that point, because Giga Chikadze won't have got him out of there, and Kattar will be bringing his way back into the fight. But I do think the fight ends early, and I'm picking Giga Chikadze to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a rematch from back in 2019. We've got Katlyn Chookagian versus Jennifer Maia. And it's always interesting when you get these rematches, because you look at how the fighters were back then, have they developed or have they digressed since that last fight. And with Katlyn Chookagian, I do think she's got a little bit better, but I do think she's also very close to being the same fighter now as what she was back then and what she pretty much always has been in the UFC. Whereas with Jennifer Maia, she has improved a game since back in 2019. Obviously, she's a boxer by trade, you know, that's predominantly a style, but she has developed into a fighter that can score takedowns, that has got good jiu-jitsu, that has got good top control and can defend takedowns as well. With that being said, though, I do think from a stylistic perspective, the fight doesn't change too much, because Katlyn Chookagian is a good BJJ player herself, both offensively and defensively. She might get taken down by Jennifer Maia in this fight, but I don't think that Jennifer Maia is going to be able to do anything really significant to alter the way the judges are going to be looking at this fight if it goes to the scorecards, which, spoiler alert, I do think it does. So I almost feel that this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. I still like the movement, the volume and the speed of Chookagian. I don't think she's going to put Jennifer Maia in too many dangerous situations in regards to hurting her, but I do think she's going to be doing enough across the 3 rounds. I don't think she wins all 3 rounds. She didn't last time out. It was a 29-28 unanimous decision, and I think we're going to see a very similar decision in this fight. I think Chookagian's volume over 3 rounds, her speed, her movement, and just her overall activity is going to outweigh what Jennifer Maia does on the feet and potentially in the wrestling and grappling departments. So I'm picking Katlyn Chookagian to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got an absolute barn burner. It's my favourite fight on the card, Brandon Royval versus Rogerio Bontorin. Brandon Royval is one of my favourite fighters. I just love watching this kid fight. He's wild, he's aggressive. He doesn't have too much regard in regards to his defence. So again, just a real fun fighter to watch. Now, both fighters are predominantly grapplers. Both fighters are good black belts in BJJ. So it's going to be really interesting when the fight hits the mat. But both fighters are really well-rounded. However, they both have slightly different styles. So for me, Bontorin is definitely the more calm, composed, technical fighter, both from a striking and a grappling perspective. Definitely more calculated in everything he does. He has got power, but again, calculation's the right word. Brandon Royval, completely the opposite. I don't think he's got quite as much power as Bontorin, but he definitely isn't calm, composed, or calculated. He likes to be in the face of his opponents, crash forwards, land strikes. He's a ball of energy. And ultimately, although Royval isn't the more technical striker, although he's not the more technical grappler, in my opinion, than Bontorin, I think the fact that Royval does like getting in the face, and like I say, he's just a ball of energy and he crashes forward hard, he's wild. He's a very difficult fighter to get a hold of, to get a read of, and to counter. And I think Bontorin's going to struggle to really get a grasp of this fight. And what that's going to allow Brandon Royval to do on the feet is it's just going to allow him to start racking up that activity, start racking up the volume. I think when the takedowns come, Royval's scrambling ability is going to be good enough for Bontorin not to be able to be safe anywhere on the mat or establish a good top control position over Royval. I think Royval, with his constant movement on the mat from position to position, if he's on his back, he'll be working submissions from bottom. I just think he's going to overwhelm Bontorin over 3 rounds. If the fight does finish, then it could be a flash submission from either side. It could be a flash knockout from either side. But I do think that if the fight goes 3 rounds and it goes to a decision, then Brandon Royval is the more likely fighter to be favoured in the eyes of the judges because of that activity, because of the fact that he's constantly looking to finish the fight. For those reasons, I'm picking Brandon Royval to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Sherman versus Jake Collier, another fight I'm really looking forward to. And no disrespect to these two guys, but again, it's another one of those low-level heavyweight fights where either fighter could just turn up on the night, look the better fighter, and win. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but it's a fact. You know, both fighters do struggle with consistency. There's times where Chase Sherman looks an absolute beast, good low kicks, good power, good aggression, but then there's times where he just doesn't apply that aggression, tires out, gasses out really badly, allows his opponents to come forward on him. And the same can be said with Jake Collier as well. So like I said, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I do tend to trust Jake Collier a little bit more in this spot. He racks up good volume. He's had multiple fights now at heavyweight where he's landing 100 plus strikes in a 3-round fight, which as a heavyweight, those are really, really good numbers. We've seen Chase Sherman tire out badly in his last few fights. So that's one thing, that one real red flag, one real area of concern. And I think if Sherman doesn't knock Collier out, which I believe he has to win this fight, I just think the activity levels of Jake Collier in the volume is going to be too much for Chase Sherman. And I don't put too much stock in Sherman's power to be able to knock someone out like Collier. Collier has got a decent chin. He's been hit hard by other previous heavyweights. So obviously, it is a heavyweight fight, and all it takes is that one clean punch to land to knock an opponent out. But I just don't think it's a high percentage outcome, if that makes sense. I do think the fight could go late. I do think it could go to a decision. That way, I trust Jake Collier's cardio more. I trust his volume more. I trust his activity more. A heavyweight that's landing 100 plus strikes in fights is definitely one that you should be favouring, especially when they're quite durable as well. So I am picking Jake Collier to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a really interesting fight here with UFC newcomer Joanderson Brito versus Bill Algeo. And this is a fight I've been having a bit of trouble with, if I'm being honest, because when I first started watching Joanderson Brito, the dude is short, he's stocky, he's explosive, he's got good takedowns, he's got decent top control, and he can go 3 rounds as well to an extent. He does start tiring in round 3 in some of his fights, but overall, Brito's a really fun fighter. Now, Bill Algeo is a fighter that hasn't been on great form. He's lost some fights that I thought he should have won, not from a bad decision perspective, just stylistically particularly pre-fight. But Bill Algeo is a really awkward guy. He's a hands-down type of striker, sits in a sideways stance, likes to throw a lot of kicks, but he's got a wrestling background. He's got good jiu-jitsu as well. I believe he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And I just feel that although Joanderson Brito is a good fighter and he does put it on his opponents and is exciting, and Bill Algeo's gonna have moments in this fight, but I just think Bill Algeo might be a little bit awkward for Brito at times. So this is what I mean about it being a really tricky fight to call, because I do like Brito. I love his style. I love his aggression. I love everything about what he does inside the cage. But Bill Algeo, if he's on his game, he's got a style that can cause Brito problems. Brito needs to get inside of boxing range to land strikes. Algeo can land kicks from the outside, halt the forward pressure of Brito, really set him or stall him and set him backwards, set him on the back foot. And then when Brito's looking to take Algeo down, I do think he's going to be able to get takedowns on Algeo. But Algeo, again, he's got a good wrestling background. And I do think that with Algeo's jiu-jitsu, he's going to be good in scrambles. It's very difficult to keep Algeo down for long periods of time. So his get-up game's pretty good. And the real factor that stopped me going hard in on Brito here is if Algeo is the offensive wrestler here and takes Brito down. We have seen Brito stuck on his back a little bit in a previous fight on the regional scene. And Bill Algeo on top with his jiu-jitsu and the good wrestling, I think he could be a problem. But with all that being said, I know it's edging towards me sounding like I'm picking Bill Algeo. I am going to be siding with Joanderson Brito here. Algeo, the problem that I've got with him is the inconsistency. The facts that, like I've already said, he's losing fights that I believe he should have been comfortably winning. Again, against Ricardo Ramos last time out, I thought that was a perfect fight for him, and it didn't go his way, and Ramos had his way with Algeo over 3 rounds. I think Brito, again, could follow a similar type of game plan to Ricardo Ramos and just edge at least 2 out of the 3 rounds. I don't think he's going to finish Algeo. Algeo was tough and durable. And the same goes for Brito. I don't think Algeo's going to finish Brito either unless it's a flash submission. He jumps on a neck or something like that. So I do think it's going to go late. I do think it could go to a decision. And I think Brito might just be able to do enough over the 3 rounds to bank at least 2 out of those 3 rounds. So for that reason, I'm picking Joanderson Brito to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jamie Pickett versus the newcomer Joseph Holmes. I like Joseph Holmes as a fighter. He's tall, he's long, he's technical, he's got a good range, he's got a good jab. He puts everything together quite well in regards to combinations. He doesn't overexert on his punches. He's got a ton of submissions on his record. He started as a grappler, but like I said, that striking is really catching up to him. Now, with Jamie Pickett, the one area where I think Joseph Holmes might come a little unstuck here is the fact that Pickett's a southpaw, and Joseph Holmes in a previous fight, he fought against a southpaw, and Holmes really likes to fight behind his jab. And when he was fighting against that southpaw, obviously the lead hand is on the same side for both fighters, so he couldn't fight behind the jab as effectively as he wanted to, and as he has done in previous fights. So I think that's the one area that I'm a little concerned with Holmes. But from Jamie Pickett's perspective, he's actually got a similar reach to Holmes, which is crazy. Both at a very similar height. But the issue that I've got with Pickett, even though he had a great win last time out, a win that I think a lot of people would have picked Staropoli, including myself, but the one issue that I've got with Pickett is he just doesn't fire often enough. There's times where he's sitting, he's waiting, or he goes to fire and he just pulls back on his strikes. And there's times where you're watching him and you're just like, Pickett, throw that punch, throw the kick. He's way too patient at times, and at times looks a little gun shy as well. And I don't think that's going to bode well with someone like Joseph Holmes, who has, like I said, adapted a good technical striking game. And I do believe Holmes can win in more ways than one. I think he can beat Pickett on the feet with volume. I think he could knock Pickett out as well. But if Holmes decides to go for the grappling and take Pickett down, then I think Holmes has got an advantage there as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Joseph Holmes to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a really intriguing fight here between Ramiz Brahimaj versus Court McGee. Now, this is a fight where I actually think that Court McGee has got enough stylistic advantages for him to be able to beat Brahimaj. I'm not saying he's going to, but I do think stylistically McGee has the tools to beat Brahimaj. But with Brahimaj, he's a fighter that is 29 years old, so it's not exactly like he's a young 25 or 24-year-old, but he's young in regards to the miles that he's got on the clock. He's not been in MMA anywhere near as long as McGee, and again, that's an advantage for McGee from an experience perspective. But Ramiz Brahimaj is a fighter that's definitely improving. In these regional scenes, it looks like he had a bad gas tank, even though he's got a good ground game. But then he comes into the UFC and he fights against Max Griffin, who's a really good and dangerous striker that's been knocking other fighters out in the UFC. Brahimaj, yes, the fight was stopped, but it was stopped because Brahimaj's cauliflower ear fell off. Brahimaj did well in that fight. You know, he stayed striking with Max Griffin for all 3 rounds for as long as it lasted. And Brahimaj, although he was soundly outstruck, he showed improvements and developments in that fight that allowed him to stay competitive with Max Griffin. And I think that's really key here with Court McGee, because I don't think Brahimaj is going to be able to take McGee down and keep him down. He might score takedowns, but McGee's really good at getting back up to his feet. He's got a solid get-up game. And then from Brahimaj's perspective, if McGee does shoot takedowns on Brahimaj's grappling is good enough to deal with McGee's scramble and get back up to his feet. So I think the wrestling and grappling in this fight might be nullified from either side. And because of that, I do think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet in the striking department. And Court McGee has shown signs lately that he's okay. You know, he fought Sean Brady and did a good job there, but then he's also been hurt badly in his last couple of losses as well. So there's a bit of inconsistency with Court McGee, and the fact that he is an aging veteran and a fighter that is definitely closer to the end of his career than he is to his prime. I do have concerns that Court McGee's performances are going to decline, as we have seen slowly and steadily over the last few years. Whereas with Ramiz Brahimaj, he's a fighter that's improving from fight to fight. I think if there is any wrestling and grappling upside here, I think Brahimaj may have it because of his dangerous submission game. But if the fight stays on the feet and Brahimaj is the same striker as he was against Max Griffin, so we're not talking about developments there, if he's the same striker against McGee as what he was against Max Griffin, I think Brahimaj will beat Court McGee over 3 rounds. If he's developed, then I think he's going to have a better time on the feet. And the danger with Court McGee is the dude just doesn't finish fights, so he's reliant on judges in 2022 to win fights, which is as dangerous as it sounds. So for me, I like the young, miles on the clock, developing Ramiz Brahimaj to beat the older, aging, nearly at the end of his career and declining Court McGee. I'm picking Ramiz Brahimaj to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got TJ Brown versus Gabriel Benitez. And I thought for sure I was going to be picking Gabriel Benitez to win this fight. But before we get into the stylistic side of things, there's just something that doesn't sit right with me and Gabriel Benitez right now. And I'm not quite sure what it is. I think he might be declining. He's not the young, explosive, quick fighter that he once was. He's 33 years old with 32 fights under his belt. I think he's been looking a little less effective in his fights lately. I don't think his speed and his movements as good as it once was. He's been getting hurt a little bit as well, which for Gabriel Benitez, that's always had good durability and always been able to take a decent punch, that's a concern. And the other sign of a decline as well is last time out against Billy Quarantillo, he was able to take him down when he wanted to and keep him down and out-grapple Benitez, not allow Benitez back up to his feet. And again, you look at Benitez's record in the UFC, watch his fights back, his takedown defense and his get-up game has always been absolutely on point. The fact that Billy Quarantillo, who is a good wrestler, but he's not a beast wrestler, was able to really pin Benitez down does, to me, start showing signs of a decline. So I am a bit concerned for Benitez. However, he does have stylistic advantages in this fight from a striking perspective. I think he's still the more dangerous striker. His kicks are so hard that TJ Brown has definitely got to be careful. We saw with TJ Brown and Chavez that Chavez really beat the leg up of TJ Brown. Benitez could definitely do that as well. So Benitez does have stylistic advantages, but again, just like I said in the last fight, TJ Brown's the younger fighter, the fighter that's developing, that's improving from fight to fight. I'm still not absolutely sold on TJ Brown, but I do think he's a decent striker. I do think he's got a good wrestling game. I do think he's got a decent top game as well. And if Gabriel Benitez was taken down and held down by Billy Quarantillo in his last fight, then I think TJ Brown could take Gabriel Benitez down and have a similar level and type of success. So again, I think Benitez is definitely going to have his moments in this fight, but I am going to side with TJ Brown. There's something, like I said, that doesn't sit right with me with Gabriel Benitez and the decline, and with Brown improving, and he's got a decent all-round game. He's probably got multiple game plans coming into this fight, a plan A and a plan B. So I am going to be picking TJ Brown to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Dakota Bush versus Viacheslav Borshchev. Viacheslav Borshchev is a really exciting fighter. He's a solid kickboxer, got plenty of experience in combat sports with his kickboxing background, and you can really see that inside the cage. He's so technical, he doesn't overexert himself, he fights behind a beautiful jab. He really messed up Chris Duncan in that Contender Series fight, and Chris Duncan is a solid fighter that is good everywhere. So the fact that Borshchev did what he did against Chris Duncan is absolutely impressive. Dakota Bush, again, another good all-round fighter. He's wild and aggressive on the feet. He does have some power, and we have actually seen Borshchev hurt in previous fights, but I actually think that's a positive. We've seen Borshchev in really bad spots. We've seen him hurt. We've seen him deep in submissions in regards to somebody trying to submit him. He doesn't give up on himself. He doesn't quit. He gets back up to his feet and he carries on. So he's been battle tested. He's been hurt. We've seen that he's been tested from a quitter perspective, and he's absolutely not a quitter. He'll stay in that fight. Dakota Bush, for me, has got to shoot and land takedowns on Borshchev, and I think he will get takedowns on Borshchev. And for me, that's the only reason that's keeping this betting line from being minus 300, minus 350 and minus 400 is the fact that Bush does have that wrestling background, and we have seen Borshchev taken down and controlled in previous fights. That's my only real concern. But with that being said, Borshchev is still winning these fights where he's getting taken down and controlled because he's finding a way back up to his feet after staying safe on the mat and then just putting an absolute clinic from a striking perspective on his opponent. So that can't be ignored either. I think Borshchev's an exciting addition to the UFC roster. I think he's going to come really unstuck when he faces a solid wrestler with a crushing top game that does keep him down. But I think someone like Dakota Bush, although he's going to have moments of success in this fight, I think Borshchev ultimately is going to find his way back up to his feet and just put, like I said, an absolute clinic on Bush. If he doesn't knock him out, which is a strong possibility that he does, then I think Borshchev can mess his face up over 3 rounds, win a decision. I'm picking Viacheslav Borshchev to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fun one here. I'm not sure why it's so low on the fight card, but we've got Brian Kelleher versus Saidyokub Kakhramonov. And again, like I said, it's a really exciting fight because Brian Kelleher always brings the action inside the cage, makes things exciting. He's got sneaky power, he's got a sneaky wrestling game, a sneaky grappling game. He's a good all-round fighter. But Saidyokub Kakhramonov is a very good fighter himself. He's young, I think he's 26 years old, developing rapidly. And even though he doesn't have the experience Kelleher has, Kakhramonov's been in there with some decent fighters. He knocked Askar out, who at the time was a 10-0 hype train prospect. He's been in the cage with Umar Nurmagomedov in the PFL. He did lose that fight, but again, it was probably Nurmagomedov's most challenging opponent to date. And then he's been in there in his UFC debut on short notice against Trevin Jones. And Trevin Jones is a no-gi world champion grappler, and Kakhramonov slept him with a submission in that 3rd round after probably being up quite comfortably over the 2.5 rounds until that submission came as well. So Kakhramonov, for me, massively developing fighter. He is a prospect. He's good everywhere. And I think although Kelleher's going to have moments in this fight, I do think Kakhramonov's going to be too much for him. Kakhramonov's speed, his movement, he's got power himself, and just the ability to be able to control fights. So when Kelleher's experience is looking like it's kicking in and Kelleher starts to control moments and positions in the fight, I think Kakhramonov's speed and his fight IQ is going to be able to just nullify that a little bit. I think Kakhramonov could score takedowns in this fight. He's got to be careful of the guillotine if he does. But aside from that, I think Kakhramonov's got a good all-round game just like Kelleher, but he's younger, more athletic, more explosive, and is a fighter that I believe is on a roll and is going to do good things inside the UFC. I think Kakhramonov is the more likely fighter to finish this fight if there is a finish. If not, then I think that he can take at least 2 out of the 3 rounds over a decision. I'm picking Saidyokub Kakhramonov to win this fight. And finally, we've got Vanessa Demopoulos versus Silvana Gomez Juarez. I think Silvana Gomez Juarez is a much better fighter than she showed in a UFC debut against Lupe Godinez. I didn't expect Juarez to lose in the way she did against Lupe Godinez, so credit to Godinez, but Demopoulos isn't Godinez. I think Silvana Gomez Juarez has got a good all-round game. She's a good boxer. She's got a good jiu-jitsu game as well. She's got good trips against the cage. Vanessa Demopoulos is a very similar fighter in a way. You know, she's good all-round. She's got decent striking, decent wrestling, but she prefers the wrestling and the top side grappling scenarios, whereas Gomez Juarez will just fight wherever the fight takes her and be good there. I think Silvana Gomez Juarez has probably just got enough to be able to check every box in this fight. I think she's going to be the slightly better striker. I think she's going to be the better wrestler or the better takedown artist in this fight. And I think she's going to be the better grappler as well. I also feel that if this fight does hit the mat, which I expect it to, that Silvana Gomez Juarez will be the one that has more top time, top side in those top positions. And because of that, when you're looking at if this fight does go to a decision where it is likely that it's going to go there, I do think that Gomez Juarez is going to have looked better on the judges' scorecards with that control time, and like I said, with the slightly better boxing as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Silvana Gomez Juarez to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast and for UFC Vegas 46 with the breakdowns and predictions. Like I said, once again, I'm sorry that this isn't a video breakdown, but there's not a lot I can do. I'm testing positive for COVID. All the video equipment's in the office, so unfortunately it has to be audio this week. If you like the podcast, if you enjoyed it, remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel too. If I've ever helped you win a bet or win some money with my predictions and analysis, I really appreciate the support. And with that said, enjoy the first fight card of 2022, and we'll see you back for UFC 270 next week.